Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes? Matt here with YoVideogames, and I'm back again with another Summer Games Fest Games impression. Only this time, unfortunately, I can only really bring you an eyes-on impression, as hands-on was not available for this title, and of course I'm talking about Monster Hunter Wilds, the brand new big old console Monster Hunter released by Capcom. Now, as you've probably seen from some of the trailers by now, yeah, it looks like this game is going to take some of the stuff from both Worlds and Rise, and it's definitely going to be combining some more elemental effects to your Monster Hunter gameplay. So why eyes on? Well, the game is very early, at least the build that they have right now. It's not exactly super stable, so we were able to watch the director of the game go through the game a couple times. But yeah, it's still very clear that this is a work in progress build. So without further ado, how was the actual game overall, though? Well, it's looking very nice. One thing that you kind of don't really get from both, Game Awards or Summer Games Fest or any other direct that happens is games with a lot of smaller, finer details like Monster Hunter really get crushed on streaming bitrate. So seeing the game in person up close, not being streamed, you can actually tell the game is actually much better looking than what you've probably seen so far. So that, just to get out of the way, it actually looks way better than what you've probably already seen online. As we start the eyes on, you start out in a village, which you would normally think would be like a hub for Monster Hunter. However, something was a little different about this one in that the village we started out in, which you could see palicos, cooking meals and whatnot. It wasn't really as big as the one in Rise or one in Worlds, and I think that's because there's a very good reason, is that this was a hub sort of within the actual field. So the big change that we can see from right now in Wilds is that when they wanted to go hunt like a monster, like in this case the Dagushuma or whatever the big bear monster was, they just walked out of this canyon that this town was in and just go find it on a map. So there's no more like, hey, go on a journey. Like the big thing here, the biggest change that we saw was there's no longer go to like a counter, select a monster quest to to fight, post on a billboard, and then depart for a journey. None of that. You just go out. Go out into the world. Like you just walk outside. Like, you just walk out of a canyon into it. The big thing that carried over from Rise to Wilds is the mount, and no longer is it a palamute. You have this Archaeopteryx looking thing, this dinosaur looking bird, Kiris, I believe. Now, the names were not final, so I'm kind of like don't want to get too focused on the names of the beasts and whatnot. But yeah, you have this Archaeopteryx looking dinosaur that you ride around on. And it basically does the exact same things as the Palamut, where you basically use it to quickly hop down and hop and ride across plains. So the fun thing is that you just call for it anytime you whistle for it. With a hotkey command, you jump on, and then he just rides out of this canyon, and he hops across some rocks and goes right on into the world. The thing can actually glide too, which is actually pretty cool. So that was actually a really fun thing to see. Another thing we saw was you can, when you're out in the field, you can set up your own base camp in specific areas, but you get a little bit of customization. You get to kind of choose where exactly you want to put it. And you have like 2 temporary base camps, you could set up out there in the field somewhere. And, there's still sort of like designated spots that you kind of need to put it in, but you kind of have a little more customization on where within that sort of zone for a field camp you can set up. So that was pretty cool to see. Another thing that struck me instantly was, so they hop on the dinosaur, they run around, they set up a base camp. Again, no loading whatsoever. You did not load. You just got, we loaded into the game. We're in the village. We get on our little dinosaur. We ride out. No loading. We just ride from inside a canyon, outside of a canyon, set up a little base camp, and then they basically travel to another area of the map. And there's this little town they enter, and this little town is where these people sort of like raise these weird goat animals and make cheese from their, from their milk and stuff. And it was just this little tiny village within the sort of desert canyon biome that you've seen in all the trailers. And again, you didn't load it into it at all. You just sort of like it was, an open world video game style. You just wandered into it, and they wandered in. They got they made you made a deal with the cheesemonger, and they got a quest line and whatever. And then they were kind of introduced to how big monster hunts work, and that is they looked on them, they opened up their map, and they saw where, you know, these bear monsters kind of congregate, and they basically want to go tackle an alpha. So they look where they are, they basically open up the map like a normal video game, you pin where they are, and they rides out to it. Again, no loading whatsoever, gets out there, and we see a sneak attack where, you know, if you get up right behind an animal, like on its butt. He put on a mantle, by the way. So mantles from World are back. I don't know how I feel about that necessarily, because it is like, okay, it's another sort of accessory you kind of got to build with you or carry around with you in your backpack. But so he gets up there, he puts on a sneaking mantle, gets up close behind this bear thing, and a little sneak attack prompt comes up, and he smacks it right in the ass, you know, just a real good amount of damage. And then, as you've probably seen from many of the trailers, hops on his dinosaur and he's leading it away. And one of the big things too is that if you're for certain animals, like, oh, you want to go for the alpha, it says quest started at that point. So instigating a big monster fight starts when you just go out into the field and you see it and you attack it, and it'll say like quest started. And if he runs away super fast and de-aggroes the big monster or whatever from the quest will actually like quest suspended or quest paused, and it'll restart when he goes back and starts refighting the thing. So it's no longer about like picking, again, like this kind of very static, you know, pick a monster from a menu and then click on a thing and then, like, you know, then click depart. That's all gone. Now it's just sort of, you go out into the world, you find a big monster, you start attacking it, and it says quest started. That's pretty cool. So after that, you know, we saw the rest of the pack kind of like protecting and attacking, and he did this thing where you basically try to lead them away. So you want to get the alpha alone by itself, so you lead it into an area where like another big monster will attack it, or, you know, you'll do something where, you know, it'll cause the smaller versions of the monster to back off or whatever. And we also got to see turf wars again. It's, you know, it's totally a thing here. The other thing we saw was the effects of the weather. So in Monster Hunter Wilds, it feels like there's going to be 3 different states for every. There's like a normal state, there's a storm state, and then there's they call it a time of plenty state. So as we lead this big bear thing out into the desert, into the dunes, we see this big giant, you know, Mad Max looking storm rolling in, and we're fighting it. We see a turf war, and we're sort of like doing everything we can to like just keep this monster, you know, engaged and on us or near us. And then as we're fighting it, this big storm rolls in. The effect looks really cool. The storm clouds rolls over, and then we're in the storm state, and everything's all like kind of like dark and darkish green and blue, and you see just lightning is happening everywhere. And when a storm encompasses an area, it changes the landscape, where a bunch of like plants or bugs may not be available anymore. Like, they just kind of like disappear, or they get swallowed up by the storm. But you start seeing other things. You'll see lightning bugs start appearing. A lot of the like more herbivore monsters, they run off, and they scamper off when the storm's getting close. And so, like, a lot of things change. Like what you have access to just on, like, you know, from ground pickup changes during a storm state. And we also saw other cool stuff where he would lead it through like a canyon, and he would attack like the canyon walls with his hook shot. By the way, you have a hook shot. You don't seem to have a wire bug, but you do have a hook shot. Functions exactly like Zelda, where if you see something like a beehive in front of you, you can lock onto it, use the hook shot, and he'll just throw it out there and like pull the thing over to him. It's more of a grapple hook, I guess, since it doesn't really pull him towards it. But yeah, you have a hook shot on your arm in the game, and you can use that to interact with the environment, where you can like pull like pieces of, like, you know, a cave ceiling down onto a monster to cause damage. So there's a little more environment interactivity, and areas you can interact. They get, like, once you use it, it gets marked on the map. Like, hey, you can affect, you can pull down, you know, rock from this area on a fight. And then after that, we also saw where after a while the storm passes and it goes into the time of plenty, and that's basically like the super springtime thing, where like all like after the storm passes, like, you just tons of vegetation start growing all over the place. Like, everything just comes into bloom, and like a bunch of animals come out like all over the place. So and this will be obviously very important during gameplay of like, hey, if you need to gather certain supplies or equipment, you might need to come out or go out during certain times, whether it's time of plenty, normal, or during a storm time, depending on if I want lightning bugs, I need to go out during a storm, stuff like that. So very impressive. Graphically, again, way better in person. As with all recent Capcom titles, this is an RE Engine game, so of course it's using, probably the latest version of this engine or something like that. You can definitely see that stuff used for Dragon's Dogma is probably carrying over here for some of the more open world stuff. We didn't get to ask any Q&A, so that is probably the one bummer I had out of all this. We didn't really get to ask anything about biomes. We didn't get to ask about crossplay or cross save, so there's still some questions that remain for Monster Hunter Wilds. And again, it definitely wasn't in a public playable state or even a media playable state at this point from what we saw, but it looked very promising. It's a very good looking game, but yeah, like it's a good start. And it'll really kind of remains to be seen how many different biomes there will be in the final game, how the seasons will affect each biome, how many monsters. We didn't see anything as far as new weapons, but we definitely saw new abilities and new moves with the classic 14 weapons that do exist. So it's not like they're just using the same stuff, but yeah. Like all the classic weapons definitely have new abilities, and yes, you can carry 2 weapons with you. We can put one on your mount and like leave and have one on your, armed on you. So yes, if when you call over your beast, which you'll be hopping on and off the beast, the dinosaur a lot, it can store a secondary weapon on the beast. So that's pretty fun to see. So yeah, it was very impressive. Definitely one of the hype or one of the more hype games that we saw at the show. Sadly, didn't get to play it, but it looked good. Again, we were sitting there like with the director as he's on a computer playing a dev build of the game. So, and yeah, it looked great. But yeah, am I looking forward to it? Very much so, but it's going to be a little bit more wait and see. Again, I really want to know what cross-play and cross-save features there are. I want to know how many biomes there are. Kind of want to see a little bit more of that. It would have been nice to spend a little more time just soaking in the atmosphere of the world because it was very good. But yeah, that's my impressions of what I've seen so far of Monster Hunter Wilds. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you on the channel. Later, dudes.